There's a cruel irony in history. The names we celebrate today as saints, heroes, and visionaries. So many of them were broken in their own time. Good people who clung to ideals of honesty, loyalty, or justice. Yet when thrown into the storm of power, they were chewed up and cast aside. Why does this keep happening? Why do the noble so often end up powerless, while the ruthless rise? This was the question haunting Niccolò Machiavelli, as he watched his beloved Florence spiral into chaos. The Florence of the late 1400s was not the romantic city of art and beauty we imagine today. Beneath its Renaissance brilliance was a constant struggle for survival. The city was surrounded by enemies: the French, the Spanish, the Papal States. Alliances shifted by the month. Families who seemed untouchable one year would be ruined the next. And inside Florence itself, power passed violently between republics, monarchs, and the infamous Medici family. Machiavelli lived at the heart of this storm. As a young man, he entered public service with hope, believing in the strength of republican government and the virtue of its citizens. He was not a soldier but a diplomat, a man of letters, someone who believed that intelligence and civic duty could guide Florence to stability. But reality was merciless. Machiavelli was sent on missions to kings and popes, men who smiled in public while plotting betrayals in private. He witnessed political agreements signed with one hand and shredded with the other. He saw cities change sides overnight, friends become enemies in the span of a dinner, allies abandon each other the moment fortune shifted. And through it all, Machiavelli watched the same tragic pattern repeat itself. The good men, the honest statesmen, the loyal commanders, the ones who placed faith in virtue and fairness, they were the ones who fell first. They trusted promises that were never kept. They relied on mercy from those who had none. They confused appearances of friendship with real loyalty, and one by one, they were ruined. Machiavelli himself would suffer the same fate. When the Medici family regained power in 1512, his years of loyal service to the Republic meant nothing. He was arrested, tortured, and exiled. Stripped of everything, he returned to his small farm outside the city. This was his turning point. Alone and out of power, he spent his nights reflecting on what had gone wrong. Not just for him, but for every idealist he had ever known. And the conclusion he reached was devastating. The problem was not that good people lacked courage. The problem was that they misunderstood the world itself. They imagined politics as a stage where honesty and fairness could triumph. But Florence had shown him that politics was not a stage, it was a battlefield. And on a battlefield, good intentions are not armor, they are targets. Sitting at his desk in exile, Machiavelli began to write. And with each page, he stripped away the illusions of morality. He stopped asking what leaders ought to do. He began asking what they must do, if they wish to survive. And this is where the Machiavelli we know today begins to take shape. When we think of philosophers, we often imagine dreamers, people searching for truth, for justice, for some higher meaning. Machiavelli was different. He didn't care about how the world should work. He wanted to describe it exactly as it is. And what he saw was brutal. In exile, cut off from politics, he wrote The Prince. Not as an idealistic treatise, but as a survival manual. A book stripped of illusions, written for rulers who wanted one thing above all: to remain in power. His conclusion was stark. The world does not reward virtue, it rewards results. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must inevitably come to grief among so many who are not good, he wrote. Goodness, in other words, is not a shield, it is a liability. This is where Machiavelli broke with centuries of moral philosophy. Most thinkers before him, Plato, Aristotle, even Aquinas, assumed politics was bound to morality. They believed a ruler should aim to be just, noble, and virtuous, because goodness was the path to stability. Machiavelli saw the opposite. A ruler who is too merciful will be crushed by the ruthless. A ruler who is too honest will be deceived by the liars. A ruler who tries to be universally loved will end up universally manipulated. For him, a leader had to embrace duality. He must be both lion and fox. The lion represents strength, the power to strike, to dominate, to deter enemies through force. But lions alone fall into traps. That is why a ruler must also be a fox, cunning, deceptive, always able to recognize when he is being deceived. Power is not about being good or evil. It is about knowing when to use strength, when to use deception, and when to hide both behind appearances. And appearances for Machiavelli were everything. He insisted that the ruler did not have to be virtuous. He only had to appear virtuous, to seem merciful, faithful, and generous, while being ready to abandon all of these when survival demanded it. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are." This was the heart of his brutal honesty. Success does not come from morality, but from perception, from control, from adaptability. To many, this sounded monstrous, but Machiavelli insisted he was simply telling the truth, a truth most people refuse to accept. And that truth echoes far beyond the politics of Renaissance Italy. We can see it in modern life, in ways both large and small. Think of workplaces, where the diligent but naive worker follows every rule, hoping their loyalty will be rewarded, only to be passed over by the cunning colleague who knows how to play the politics of the office. Think of politics, where well-meaning candidates cling to ideals of fairness and transparency, only to be outmaneuvered by rivals who know how to manipulate perception, frame narratives, and strike when no one expects it. Even in personal relationships, the same principle holds. The one who assumes honesty will be reciprocated, often becomes the easiest to deceive. The one who assumes kindness guarantees loyalty, often finds themselves abandoned. This is Machiavelli's world, a place where those who cling too tightly to virtue are eaten alive by those who know how to exploit it. And this is what makes his philosophy so unsettling. He wasn't celebrating cruelty. He wasn't teaching people to be monsters. He was warning us, this is how power works. If you ignore it, you will lose to those who don't. It is not a comfortable truth, but it is perhaps the most dangerous truth of all. So why do good people end up powerless? For Machiavelli, the answer lies in a cruel paradox. The very qualities that make someone good are the same qualities that make them vulnerable. He saw three patterns again and again. First, good people underestimate ruthlessness. They assume others will play fair, that promises mean something, that mercy will be returned in kind. But in the realm of power, fairness is not the natural order, it is the exception. The ruthless understand this, the good deny it. Second, good people confuse how the world should work with how it actually works. They build their strategies on ideals, on fairness, on trust. But the world runs on advantage, deception, and force. They mistake hope for strategy, and they suffer the consequences. Third, good people cling to their reputation instead of their survival. They would rather be seen as honorable than adapt to circumstances. They value the image of goodness so highly that they cannot see how it enslaves them. Their predictability makes them easy prey for those who care nothing for appearances. This is the trap of goodness. It convinces you that virtue alone will protect you. It tells you that morality is a shield, when in truth it often makes you a target. Machiavelli's advice was not to abandon morality altogether, but to recognize that morality without power is fragile, and often fatal. He argued that if you want to survive, you must learn to combine strength with cunning, principle with pragmatism, to know when to keep your word and when breaking it is the only path forward. As he wrote, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. To most of us, this feels uncomfortable, even offensive. We want to believe goodness is its own reward. We want to think that honesty, fairness, and loyalty are enough to carry us through. But Machiavelli looked at the world and asked, is that really true? Think of history's tragic idealists, leaders who refused to compromise, who held their principles no matter the cost, and were destroyed, taking their ideals down with them. Think of modern life, where the naive worker, the honest politician, or the endlessly forgiving partner gets devoured by those who bend the rules. This is why Machiavelli remains so disturbing, because deep down we recognize the truth in his warning. The tragedy is not simply that evil triumphs. The tragedy is that good people refuse to adapt. They cling to purity until it becomes their undoing. Their ideals do not transform the world, they are buried with them in silence. And so Machiavelli leaves us with a question we would rather avoid. Is it better to be good and powerless, a person of integrity remembered only as a victim? Or is it better to survive in a world that does not reward goodness at all? Machiavelli forces us to confront something we'd rather not admit. Goodness by itself is rarely enough. The world is not designed to reward purity. It rewards those who understand how power moves, and who are willing to bend when survival demands it. That doesn't mean we must abandon morality, but it does mean we must stop confusing morality with safety. To live with our eyes open is to see that ideals without strength cannot endure. And perhaps the challenge for us is the same one Machiavelli left for Florence: to find a way to hold on to what is noble, without being destroyed by what is real. If you found this exploration of Machiavelli insightful, consider subscribing for more deep dives into philosophy and the hidden truths of human nature. Thank you for watching.